Throughout history, the search for the Northwest Passage was attempted by many explorers. The first Europeans to lay eyes on the Canadian Arctic was the Vikings, who made it as far as Skraeling Island. They had left from Greenland while searching for new hunting grounds, and also trading with the Inuit people. It's unknown if they attempted the passage. The Northwest Passage, located in the Canadian Arctic, is known for being one of the most dangerous shipping areas in the world. With its unpredictable weather, icebergs, its dangerous shallows, and ever-changing ice. But finding a shorter route to the Pacific spurred on many explorers. The first known attempt at finding the passage was from John Cabot in 1497. One of the most well-known expeditions has been covered on this channel before, the Franklin Expedition. Two ships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, set off from England in 1845 to conquer the passage once and for all. They were the most well-prepared expedition to date. The ships were given steam engines that had been converted from locomotives. It was believed the engines and screw propellers could plow through the ice. Their bows were reinforced, and the crew had the luxury of 8,000 cans of food and a library of 1,000 books to help the crew pass time. The expedition never made it out of the ice. Search parties searched frantically for the lost men. They found their camp and 3 graves at Beechy Island. A stone cairn with a note found that stated that the expedition had been trapped in the ice and the ships had been abandoned. Bones and graves were found scattered throughout the Arctic, as well as the ship's lifeboats with random items from the ships, including food, clothing, silverware, books, and bodies of the missing crew. In 2014, the HMS Erebus was found in Wilmot and Crampton Bay, and in 2016, the HMS Terror was found in Terror Bay, on the south shore of King William Island. For years, the Inuit testimonies were not believed, but it was the Inuit stories which led to the discovery of the lost ships. Robert McClure was given credit for completing the Northwest Passage partly by ship and partly on sledge, while in the 1950 search party for the lost Franklin expedition. Now onto the famous explorer, Roald Amundsen, who was born July 16, 1872, in Norway. His family owned and captained ships in Norway. His family grew up on the sea. But his mother did not want her son to spend a life at sea, so she insisted that he become a doctor. He worked on his schooling until his mother died when he was 21. After this, he quit college and then turned to a life at sea. As a boy, he read Sir John Franklin's stories from his time as an explorer in the Arctic. He claimed these stories helped shape his life. In 1901, he purchased the herring fishing boat Gjoa. It was built in 1872. It was 70 feet long and 20 feet wide, much smaller than the warships Erebus and Terror, who got trapped in the ice under Sir John Franklin's 1845 expedition. Roald was planning a trip through the Northwest Passage, something he had dreamt about since he was a young boy. But instead of having a large crew with thousands of pounds of supplies, he intended to travel light and live off the land with a small crew. He wanted some experience in the ice, so he hired an experienced sealing crew and spent a few months with the crew and captain of the Gjoa seal hunting in the Barents Sea. Since he had no real experience sailing in the Arctic, this gave him some time to sit back and watch an experienced captain in the ice. After this trip, he made improvements on the ship. He equipped an early Dan 13 horsepower hot bulb 4-stroke semi-diesel engine. The fuel ignited by coming into contact with a preheated metal surface within the cylinder. He also added a winch and prepared her for the ice. In 1902, he sailed to Christiania, modern Oslo, Norway, which was united under a political union with Sweden. King Oscar had financed science expeditions in the past, and he did it this time as well, and helped Amundsen by giving a generous donation for his expedition. His main objective was to find out if the magnetic North Pole had shifted since its discovery. Roald Amundsen ended up fleeing Norway to escape creditors and legal problems before embarking on his Northwest Passage expedition. He had accumulated significant debts while outfitting the Gjoa and preparing for the journey. Amundsen was expedition leader and captain. His other crew members were Godfried Hansen, Anton Lund, Helmer Hansen, Peter Ristovit, Gustav Julwick, Adolf Henrik Lindström. They left Norway on June 16, 1903, and headed for Greenland. The men headed through Baffin Bay, then Lancaster Sound, Barrow Strait. They eventually reached Beechey Island on August 22, 1903. Amundsen chose Beechey Island because this is the spot where Franklin chose to spend his first winter. He wanted to pay his respects to Sir John Franklin and his men. This is the location where 3 graves were dug for Sir John Franklin's men who died at camp that first winter. He followed Sir John Franklin's route to the southeast end of King William Island. He was surrounded by ice in October, at present-day Gjoa Haven. He wintered here for 2 years. It was here where he met the Inuit, who were on a hunting trip. The Inuit had noticed blood in the snow and the remains of a butchered caribou. They also found footprints, and they were not from his people, so they followed the tracks and spotted a ship from the distance. The next day, a group of Inuit went to the ship. Amundsen and 2 crew members went out to meet the Inuit with rifles. They were not sure how the Inuit would react, but the Inuit were curious and welcoming to Amundsen and his men, so he invited them aboard the ship. A small Inuit village would soon move nearby. Amundsen worked to gain their trust. He wanted to learn from the Inuit, since they were adapted to the harsh Arctic weather. He knew the knowledge they possessed would assist him in completing the Northwest Passage. They traded knives, tools, and other goods with the Inuit for their knowledge. The Inuit taught the men how to build shelter. The crew learned how to build igloos to stay warm in freezing conditions and to block the wind. Amundsen and his men wore heavy wool clothing that made the men sweat and put them at risk for frostbite. The Inuit taught them how to dress in traditional clothing made from caribou skins. It was warm, lightweight, and breathable. The clothing was loose to allow air to go between the layers. The Inuit also taught Amundsen the importance of traveling using dog sleds. They made journeys with sledges to find the location of the magnetic North Pole, but the location had shifted since its discovery in 1831 by James Clark Ross. This proved that the location of the magnetic North Pole moved. This was one of Amundsen's objectives. The Norwegians had no experience in dog sledding. It was a hard learning curve, but the Inuit taught them how to add ice to the sledge to make it slide over any type of snow, and how to control and encourage the dogs. The Inuit showed Amundsen and his men how to locate seal breathing holes in the ice. He taught them how to remain silent and motionless near the breathing hole so that they did not scare or alert the seal. They taught the men patience and that it could take hours for a seal to show itself. The Inuit used a harpoon made from wood, bone, or ivory to kill the seal. Amundsen tried to learn the Inuit language and their culture. He would stay for 2 years before setting off to complete the Northwest Passage. The Inuit camp had reached around 50 people. Amundsen did not want to destroy the Inuit way of life. Amundsen and his crew set sail on August 13, 1905, on board the Gjoa to complete the final stage of the journey. They traveled through the dangerous straits below Victoria Island. but they made it into the Beaufort Sea, completing the Northwest Passage. After this, they were forced to winter iced in near Herschel Island in Canada's Yukon Territory. American whaling ships were also stuck in the ice nearby. When the ice was thick enough to travel on, they went to speak with the American whalers. Amundsen decided to make a 400-mile journey to Eagle Island to send a telegram about his success in completing the Northwest Passage. He wrote about this in My Life as an Explorer. It reads, "On my part, I was wild with eagerness to get to a telegraph office and send the news to the world of our success in conquering the Northwest Passage. The wires were damaged by the ice, and he had to wait to find out if the message had made it out to the world. After the wire was fixed, he received news that the message was received. He stayed in Eagle for months to rest and receive telegrams congratulating him on his completion of the passage. He stayed in the cabin of Frank Smith. After his time in Eagle, Amundsen made the difficult journey back to the stranded crew. When he arrived, Gustav Jule Wick had died that final year trapped in the ice from illness. But the ship was still stuck in the ice until July 11th. They then headed to Nome, Alaska, and then to San Francisco. They arrived on October 19, 1906, and anchored off Point Bonita. They found the city destroyed after the 1906 earthquake, but the crew was still hailed as heroes. The Gjoa remained in San Francisco. It was donated, dragged up on a wooden slide, and put on display in Golden Gate Park from 1909 to 1972. Amundsen and his remaining crew took a commercial ship back to the newly independent Norway. Norway had gained its independence while the crew was away. Roald Amundsen would go on to be one of the most famous Arctic explorers. He would be the first to reach the South Pole and the first to fly over the North Pole. He set off to complete what his hero, Sir John Franklin, could not do, find the Northwest Passage. He did it with a small crew, limited supplies, and a small ship. Roald Amundsen disappeared on June 18, 1928. He was on a rescue mission flying in the Arctic after the airship Italia, which had crashed on its return trip from the North Pole. Many believe that he crashed in the Barents Sea. I want to thank you all for watching this episode, folks. Again, I've been fascinated with this story ever since I was a kid. Anything to do with the Arctic, any explorations, any expeditions, I've just been fascinated by all of them. And this one is at the top of the charts. And what those men did, what they went through, it just proves that back then, men were men. Again, I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you on the next. Peace.